And we're back. We're back again this week, live in the studio, and we're not alone. We're not alone. We have a couple of guests here with us, John Bohannon and Dorothy Leach. They're with the Community Asylum Seekers Project, and if you've been paying attention, their good work has been getting noted in local press, and now we have them here. John, tell us about yourself.
I'm John Bohannon. I live in Saxton's River. Have lived here since 1985. I was in the Army for 20 years. Then I taught at a high school for 25 years. And I've been in CASP since its origins, although I'm not one of the founders. And I felt motivated to help people like those we help right now because of their difficult situation and the fact that we Americans have open arms for those in need.
We're going to get more into that. Dorothy, what's your story?
I'm Dorothy Leach. I'm an educator at the high school level. I live in Rockingham. And I got into CASP because I went down to McAllen, Texas with Steve Croster, our founder. We saw people coming out of detention and going on to wherever their sponsors or families were, where they would live and seek asylum. And it moved me. I mean, this is an affair of the heart. When you see people who are fleeing conditions that are so bad that they're willing to give up everything, you just have to do something. So that's why I'm involved in CASP.
Man, we just jumped into this both feet first. Let's back up. Let's talk about the work of CASP, the Community Asylum Seekers Project, and give people a little more understanding into what you both just said.
CASP, like most organizations, has a mission statement, and our mission is to provide basic needs and a supportive community for those in the process of seeking asylum in the United States.
What does that mean?
It means that when people come to our country and need to seek asylum, they need support. We do our best to provide a home, food, clothing, and the things that they need to eventually become independent in this society. And also a large part of it is that they've got to go through proving that they have a case, and that's a very complicated process.
So this is different. Asylum seekers are not the same as somebody coming for economic reasons. Is that right?
Right. An asylum seeker is officially called an asylee. An asylee is really a refugee who is saying, I would like to have asylum in your country. So they are refugees, but they have a particular threat. It's called a credible threat. And when that refugee convinces an authority figure of that, then they're allowed to stay in this country until they can go before an immigration judge and present their case. This can take from 6 months to 3 years before they can get in front of a judge.
Credible threat. Threat of what?
Of violence and persecution in their own country. The asylees that we're currently working with have to submit an extensive statement that may be as much as 50 pages. They work with a lawyer, and because they're going to need to convince a judge that their case is credible. And very often that means that they also need to get statements from witnesses, and which is very difficult to do because they're in America and they're fleeing. They've fled from a country. They're no longer there. So they have quite a bit of work ahead of them when they get here. It's really important for us to also emphasize that their status here is absolutely legal.
And a refugee is defined by the UN as someone who has been forced to flee his or her country because of persecution, war, or violence. And they have a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. And an asylee or asylum seeker is the same, and they have asked for asylum. Mm-hmm. In 1948, the United Nations generated the Universal Declaration of Rights of Man, and Article 14 in that document says everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. So if an asylee can prove persecution, then they have a right to stay here, according to the United Nations, which of course we're members of.
That seems pretty basic and pretty simple and pretty straightforward.
Yes, it does.
But they have to prove up their claim.
That's right.
And so it's not an easy process.
Right. And as Dorothy just said, it involves extensive personal statement. It involves either witnesses or affidavits, if you can get them. And it involves legal counsel, because this is a legal process, and most asylees are not going to know how to do that.
I'm imagining, or trying to imagine, the state of mind that a person must have to be in order to leave the place they know, the language they know, the country that they probably love, even if they're being persecuted. That's got to be difficult.
That's right.
Yeah.
Each one of them has gone through a trauma. They react to the trauma in different ways, and they have to get through it. I mean, you can imagine it's like homesickness that we've all gone through, magnified by 100 times. It must be very, very difficult.
They don't just get in their cars and drive here either. You know, they're walking through the desert. They're hopping rides, if they can, on tops of trains. They're kidnapped along the way. They're abused along the way. They frequently have nothing but what they have in their pockets. It's trauma. It's traumatic. And they are bound to be suffering either current or post-traumatic stress disorder from these experiences.
And the work of the Community Asylum Seekers Project contributes to the thing that I'd like to see, and that's a compassionate society.
Yep.
I was seeing something online somewhere recently about the percentage of immigrants who operate small businesses and employ people. They recognize opportunities that we don't necessarily.
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, they come here with a need to make money, and their entrepreneurial areas that they can fill and ways that they can actually hire people and provide jobs as those businesses become successful. So yes, they're absolutely contributing members of society here as they get on their feet.
You mentioned local host homes. What does a local host home, what does a host do? What do they provide?
Well, this could be the home of a couple whose children have grown up and gone away and they have extra room. The situation will vary from home to home, but the home itself provides shelter. And then as the family gets to know the asylees and what they need, they help them with their relationship with school system or getting health care or transportation here and there, and of course meals. We like to surround the host homes with a team of supporters because it is a big job. But if it's spread among a number of people, then it's a much smaller job. One of the things about being involved with this kind of activity is that there are a couple of ways of doing good in the world. One is to give money to a large organization or get involved in a larger organization, and you give a little to a lot of people. And this is something different. This is giving a lot to a few people. And in that way, it can be very, very fulfilling.
Yeah, we're not talking about heated swimming pools or anything.
No.
We're talking about basic. I mean, they're fleeing their countries without the proper clothes.
Yeah.
For Pete's sake. I mean, it's cold here.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was a bit of a shock to the people we are currently hosting when winter hit. They'd arrived here, I think, in August, was it?
In October.
In October. And it was already chilly by their standards.
And the mom couldn't imagine that leaves were that beautiful.
How are they doing? How are they adjusting?
They're doing very well. There's a bit of sadness, which you would expect, but the other side of what these people are is they're strong and optimistic. I think that immigrants who come to this country have that going for them. They're kind of self-selected in a way that means they're special. And I think you find that in asylum seekers.
Every once in a while, I'll hear about an asylum seeker that ends up warehoused in a basically a prison for years. And why?
When you apply for asylum at a border crossing, and you're allowed to stay because you have a credible threat and you're awaiting your court hearing, you can go stay with friends. You're perfectly legal in the country. You have documentation. You can go stay with friends. You can go stay with family. But you have to have a destination. You can't just go wandering off. And if you don't have a destination, you're kept in for-profit detention centers at the crossing site or elsewhere. And you're kept there indefinitely until you find a place to go. And of course, that's hard to do if you don't have family and don't have relatives or friends. And of course, that's what CASP is doing. We are becoming the friends of the people who need a place to go.
How does that connection happen?
When we were in Texas, Steve Crofter got interested in the possibility that Vermont could be a place where asylum seekers could come. And he started talking to people down there, including the consuls, the various consuls from Latin American countries. And so little by little, connections were built up. It started there. Then we got together as a group and
we sent emails and letters to immigration attorneys explaining that we were prepared to host. We sent emails and letters to the people at the border crossings who try to help out the folks when they get out of detention, saying that we were available and just let us know if you had a family that we might be able to host. So I would say certainly east of the Mississippi, we've contacted hundreds of people. I would say we have a large network of folks who will contact us and say, we have a family of this size, of this type. Can you help them out? And we try to make a match, of course.
That's excellent.
Yeah. To be honest with you, Mark, our problem are hosts. It's like you're going to be on home for a distant relative you've never met and you know has had a hard life and you know nothing about them.
it's a little like having a baby.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
And you don't speak the same language and they don't know any of the customs.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I see the baby analogy. I see how that works. What are the numbers? I mean, there are immigrants, there are refugees, there are asylum seekers, and all kind of blends. What are the numbers? Do we have any idea?
Yes, we do.
Oh, yes.
Oh, boy, look at you prepared people.
As of measures that were done in 2015, there were 21.3 million refugees globally. In the U.S. under President Obama in 2017, there were 110,000 refugees coming to this country. President Trump wants to cut this in half, but the courts have blocked this move. And as of the current year, we've had 42,000 refugees come here. For asylum seekers, their figures are a little bit different. In 2015, there were 40.8 million globally, and in the same year, 26,000 or so asylum seekers came into the U.S.
That's a big disparity in the numbers. When you're talking about those tens of millions, are those all people that are displaced and on the move in the world, or just people that want out? I don't know why I use the word just.
Right. It's really overwhelming what an issue this is. There are currently about 7.6 billion people on Earth, and there are 65.6 million displaced persons. Now, those are refugees, people who just can't go home tonight, all kinds of different situations. That's approximately 1% of the population. There's 22.5 million refugees. I mean, all you have to do is look at the newspaper to realize every day, wherever there's fighting, people are being displaced, driven out of their homes, forced to really operate at the survival level.
And even in places where there isn't fighting, there's real violence just in people's hometowns without wars going on.
Oh, boy. We're talking with John Bohannon and Dorothy Leach. They're with the Community Asylum Seekers Project, doing good work right here in the area. We've been talking about things that are both hard and hopeful. I just don't have any idea where to steer things from here.
Well, we were just talking about what happens to an asylum seeker when they land at the border, what happens to them on their way from there to a host home. The first thing that happens is that they give themselves up and they're held in a locked facility for an uncertain period. That can be a matter of days, weeks, or months. The reputation of those locked facilities is not good. They're for-profit prisons. At any rate, you can imagine that these people are in fear. They have no idea what's going to be going on, and very often they're transferred from one place to another without anybody telling them, okay, now it's time to go here, and this is the reason. They're just transferred. But at some point or another, they're given a credible fear interview. So that's, at that point, the determination is made that they have a reasonable claim for asylum. Then they are released if they have any relatives or friends or a sponsor. They can find a sponsor like the CASP group, our group, to support them. We have heard that those asylum seekers who turn out to be successful are generally the ones who get a lawyer. Some will try to go through it without obtaining a lawyer, but that's perilous. And the whole process can take up to 3 years. At some point, the asylum seeker can begin to apply for work, and that's 180 days after he or she submits their application.
So they're not even allowed to work for
quite a while.
A few months.
Yeah.
Again, I'm trying to put my feet in somebody else's shoes, and heaven forfend anything should happen in this country, but say there's some kind of a alternate reality crackdown and they are killing the people from my political party or my race or my religion, and I managed to find a way out and somehow got across an ocean to another country where I don't speak that language. They don't speak my language. I don't know anybody. I don't have anything. That would freak me out a little bit.
Yeah.
And so what you would count on would be the hospitality of whatever community you ended up in.
I would hope for people like you, yeah.
And that actually has been what has impressed me the most about CASP is the number of people in this area who have been not grudgingly willing, but enthusiastically willing to help out in lots of different ways. This includes fundraising in churches, donations through annual appeals. We remodeled the part of a barn that used to be an apartment. We refurbished it, and people donated labor and material and advice. We have a Spanish-speaking family here. They're receiving English lessons, both adults and children. A local hospital has offered basic health care for free. Thrift shops, we went to all the thrift shops, and they just said, come in and get what you want.
A music teacher is offering guitar lessons to one of our kids.
Outstanding. I like the way this is turning. Let's continue to celebrate how this is working and what the future looks like. Let's keep talking about the good things.
This Mexican family has a 10-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl. And they came to my house in Saxons River in, I think it was mid-October. My 2 grandchildren, who are around the same age, and some village children were there. And they climbed trees together, played soccer together, went bicycle riding together, bobbed for apples, which was quite a sight. There have been donations of skates and cross-country skis. The children, at least, are enjoying the snow, even if the mother doesn't.
We get hugs every time we see the family. That's a wonderful thing. Yeah. And we talked a little bit about how providing a host home can be a large job, but one of our host home people has said, she said, our lives are big and full and interesting now. My heart is full to bursting. It's permanently open and tender and a little bit raw because of what we've done, inviting people into our home.
I can see how it would be life-changing.
Yeah.
for everybody involved.
That's right. I mean, we all know that exposure to other cultures is a valuable, not only educational, but cultural and personal experience. And this is a wonderful way to do it. And it's a win-win for everybody.
How do people get involved? If somebody's listening and they want to get involved, what do they do? Who do they talk to? Where do they go?
Well, we have a website, caspvt.org. And on there's a place to sign up to be on our email list. And that same website has a phone number and address to send letters or actually make a phone call. Dorothy and I are both on the board of directors. There are 6 of us. Contact any one of us if you'd like to be involved.
On St. Patrick's Day, there's going to be a sing-along concert of Irish folk songs, and that'll be held at the All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church in Brattleboro, West Brattleboro, at 7 p.m. Tickets are on sale both at Everyone's Books in Brattleboro and also at Books on the Square, or have I got that name right? In Bellows Falls.
And we, of course, are planning as many activities as we can. We figure it costs about $10,000 a year to host a family of any size within reason. On the 5th of May in Brockways Mills, there's a Pansy Festival.
A what?
Pansy Festival.
Oh! I put a T in there.
A pansy is a flower.
I was going to Pansy. Now I'm embarrassed for myself.
And it's going to be a family affair with games for children and food and music. That's also a fundraising event for us. And we have an annual appeal. I really recommend people look at our webpage, which has a history of CASP, photographs of the people we're hosting now, and other information.
So, Mr. Founder down there in Brattleboro, and you too, you just went down to Texas specifically for this, looking for trouble in general, or?
No, specifically for this. We had about a week. We drove down there, and we spent the week at the social hall of the Sacred Heart Church in McAllen, Texas, where the Catholic Charities run this way station for asylum seekers. And they come through and they get food and water, diapers and supplies for the babies, and a shower and a clean change of clothes, and a place to sleep if they need it, and a goodie bag for their bus trip, and help to know where to go to catch the bus.
And it's not an underground railroad. This is all legit. This is all above board.
Yes.
There's nothing sneaky.
Absolutely not.
Seemed important for me to point that out. I don't know why.
Another one of our goals is to expand the number of hosts and volunteers in this area. As should be pretty clear by now, there are lots of asylum seekers. So the hosts are the key. Also, I think it's important to point out that because you say you'll be a host doesn't mean you have to host this family until their case is resolved. For instance, you can say, I can do it during the summer. Mm-hmm. And then when fall gets here, I'm going to go somewhere. You're going to find a replacement. That's perfectly fine. And the second thing that we are sure to be aware of is that sometimes people just don't get along.
Yeah.
So you can Skype with your potential guests in your home and see how that works out. We can have an interpreter available. But just make sure you at least superficially seem congenial.
Yeah. Well, everybody needs to be comfortable on all sides.
Right. There's enough tension here already. We don't need to worry about how you're going to be treated when you come here or worrying about what your guests are going to be like. Mm-hmm. So we want everyone to be comfortable with the situation. Then we can always use volunteers, people who are willing to drive, people who would like to invite the asylum family over for dinner. Mm. Maybe someone in your family speaks Spanish. You want to practice. Invite them over for dinner. You have children of the same age. Be a wonderful thing to do.
Is there anything that we have missed? Is there anything else we should cover?
No, I think, Mark, we've covered pretty much all we intended to cover.
I think the work you're doing is important, and I thank you for doing it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for having us here.
No, we didn't get rid of them. I've still got John and Dorothy here. We were talking over the music, and they've got some stories, and I'm kind of hoping that they might share a couple of those. Take us to the top of the hour at least. One of you.
Okay,
start.
one of us has to talk. I was mentioning how we invited the family to our house in late October. The children were all playing around, and I said, they were playing soccer. And I said, there's a great soccer player 2 doors up from our house. This is probably the best defensive soccer player you've ever seen. I bet you won't be able to shoot around this player. The kids, including this Mexican boy, Juan, said, take us up there. So we went up, and they were talking trash, on the way up there. And we went up to the backyard of our neighbors, and I said, could you go get Tilly? I said, it's a soccer challenge. So he said, okay. So he went in and got his corgi dog, Tilly. And Tilly came out, and these boys just started rolling their eyes, saying, what kind of a joke is this? But they could not shoot. Tilly can dribble the ball on her nose. Tilly is the fastest thing on 4 stubby little legs you've ever seen. And they learned a lesson about who are real soccer players.
And by the time I got out there that day, Tilly could barely walk. She was so tired. So early on, this family needed boots. And we went driving up to Claremont. And as we were driving, I said, comprar, to shop, or almorzar, to have lunch. And I hear this chorus from the back seat, almorzar. So that's what we did.
We have spent the last hour talking with John Bohannon and Dorothy Leach. They're with the Community Asylum Seekers Project. If you're just tuning in, if you missed it, go to the website CASPVT. That's CASPVT.org. It'll explain the mission. It'll explain what they do. It'll explain how you can get involved.
And we do need for you to be involved. It is a Community Asylum Seekers Project.
Ooh.
And we don't bite.
No, they haven't even snarled at me, not even once. Thank you both for coming in and for doing your work.
You're so welcome.
Thank you.